Good morning, all. We'll be starting in just 1 minute. Please just give us a few minutes. We'll be starting shortly. Thank you.
Hold on. Hold on.
So we are having some technical difficulties, but hopefully we've gotten that out of the way. My name is Neil Albert, and I am the President and CEO of the Downtown Business Improvement District. And today we wanted to share with you the plans that the Department of Transportation has for car-free lanes along 7th Street between Pennsylvania Avenue and Massachusetts Avenue. These, as you guys may have read, the announcement that the mayor released about sometime last week. And here with us today to share the plans is Haley Peckett from the Department of Transportation. Once Haley goes through her presentation, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. If you have a question, you can either put it in the chat That's at the bottom of your screen, or there's a Q&A button also at the bottom of the screen. So thank you so much for joining us this morning, and sorry for the delay. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Haley.
Hi, I'm Haley Peckett from DDOT, and thank you for having me, Neil. We're really excited about this project and this opportunity. I'm going to do a quick overview of the car-free our plans and a little bit about the project timeline, and I'm going to use resources that are available on the DDOT website. So I'll share my screen and show you where these are, so it will be easy for you to access these resources and share them with your colleagues. I will share my screen here. Maybe. All right, so I'm going to start right here. So this is DDOT website for car-free lanes for buses and bikes. And from here, you can see lots of different resources that share this. So DDOT is pursuing 3 new car-free lanes. It's part of our COVID-19 response. We want to help the district and all travelers to reopen safely and provide more reliable, faster speeds for buses, which are really part of the lifeline transportation for our essential workers and for lots of people that are traveling through the district. So we have 3 projects going in. The one we'll talk about today is on 7th Street. This is going to be car-free lanes where we're limiting the entirety of 7th Street in the project area to buses, bikes, and trucks. And we also have 2 other projects going in on MLK Avenue Southeast, as well as M Street Southeast. And if you're interested in those, feel free to check out some of the information on our website. So usually at the bottom, we have a handout, and I'm going to go to that to walk through some background about the project itself. So, if you're on the website, so you can see that we are launching this project. It's a priority of the mayor. We've been looking at this corridor for a long time. There's so many dynamic uses that go on 7th Street. It is one of our busiest pedestrian hubs. There's certainly lots of events and activity and lots of businesses and residents in this area. And there's really activity 24 hours a day. The mayor really liked the idea of car-free lanes here to focus on one of the areas where buses slow down, as well as one of the areas where pedestrians could use more space to be able to walk around safely. And the bid and the mayor and DDOT recognized this last year when we restriped 7th Street and we added some of the curb extensions and planters, which you may remember with the khaki paint and some of the flex posts and new planters that are on the ground. That helps enhance pedestrian safety, and the restriping was to align the lanes to allow for vehicles and especially buses to be able to travel through more efficiently, so buses wouldn't get stuck behind turning vehicles. So as we think about a way to pilot and implement this project quickly in response to COVID, we are keeping the restriping that went in last year, and we are going to be painting parts of the street red, but restricting traffic to buses and trucks for this corridor. You can see here that the reasons are because we want to enhance bus speed and reliability throughout the district, but this is one of the areas that we have buses that go through from north to south through the city that really are high ridership, high frequency, one of the lifeline networks for the district. And this is what a lot of people depend on to be able to make it to essential jobs and services. So even during COVID, as we see transit ridership decrease on our trains, we've actually seen bus ridership maintain that essential service for workers that are using it that don't have access to other means for transportation. We are starting to quick on the timeline of the project. We are in design right now, just wrapping up design, and we are starting construction. We're planning to start construction around August 17th, but the traffic patterns will likely not go into effect until early September. So we're still working on the exact timeline for that. And so I'm going to share with you what we're looking at. The project stretches from Massachusetts Avenue in the north to Pennsylvania in the south. We recognize that there are some garages that are on the north block, and there's also access to Indiana Avenue on the south. So there will be some vehicular access on those areas, but for the most part, between this area, this is going to be for buses and trucks only. You may ask why we included trucks in this area. This 7th Street is one of our truck through routes in the district, and we know there are a lot of trucks that pass through here from points north and south to get to other destinations in the district, and we didn't want to reroute those trucks elsewhere in downtown where we didn't necessarily have the infrastructure in place. We anticipate that once we restrict this to buses and trucks, we will have about 10% of the vehicle volume that we have in current or pre-COVID conditions, and that will help both buses and trucks operate a lot faster, as well as provide a safer environment for cyclists to operate. Bicycles are allowed in any bus lane per district regulations. We are further through an emergency rulemaking, restricting taxis and other hire vehicles from the bus lanes. That's a new rule that we have just enacted, and not just here on 7th Street, but for all of our bus lanes in the district. We recognize that this, as I said, is a very important corridor for businesses and for deliveries. We know that there's lots of restaurants on this corridor, and they really rely on food delivery and food delivery services. And certainly we hope that there are lots of patrons that are starting to come back and get takeout food or be able to enjoy outdoor and indoor dining as permitted by our phased reopening. And so with that in mind, we know that getting passengers, certainly our first priority is for passengers to be able to take transit, but for passengers or for businesses that need vehicular access, we're providing a robust curbside plan to allow access from every cross street. So this page shows our curbside plan right now. It's certainly subject to change, but if you see in purple, these are all of our pickup and drop off zones. So we call them PUDO zones. It's a fairly new program in the district. We've had them for about a year. And these are zones that we've set aside that just allow for active loading and unloading and for those really short trips to drop off and pick up passengers. It could be delivery for food, as well as anything in yellow is a commercial loading zone. So any commercial vehicle can use our park mobile system and reserve these spaces, and can also use those for the types of loading activities that could include restaurant delivery or other freight delivery. There are 3 existing spaces, commercial loading zones that are on 7th Street, and we added 1 new one. So 2 of them are just south of 8th Street, and then there's another existing one that's down just north of D Street. We're leaving each of those and we're adding a new one right in front of the pedestrian alley across from G Street Northwest. And these are for trucks only, but meant to address the fact that many of the retail establishments on the corridor do have truck deliveries on a regular basis, and we want to be able to meet that need. We're putting sidewalk extensions in everywhere that you see blue on the corridor. And I can talk a little bit more about those sidewalk extensions in a minute. But because of that, those are 8-foot sidewalk extensions. There isn't areas for trucks to pull over except for at these commercial loading zones. And then everywhere in green is a bus zone. So those are existing. We're keeping them and having spaces for the metro buses to be able to safely load and unload passengers. I'd encourage you to visit the website. You'll be able to see a little bit more of this information up close. The last thing I will share is this is also linked from the website. We have frequently asked questions. And so we have some general questions about how the lanes will operate, how the enforcement will occur, and other areas about sidewalk extensions, bicyclists, and specific user groups. We also have some headings specifically for residents and businesses. And so just noting the curbside loading, we've pointed out where the truck loading zones are, where the commercial loading zones are, and then how delivery vehicles can park and pick up food. The last thing that I would highlight is that it's really important to DDOT and that I think for the bid that this works for businesses. We're excited about piloting this new approach to provide more space for multimodal users and for buses in particular, but we really want it to work for businesses. So we're excited about partnering with you to collect data and tell us how it works for your businesses as we get up and running. The curbside plan that I had shared before, to some degree, this is flexible. So if we start seeing as we get underway that there's additional curbside space that's needed in certain areas, or that there's areas that we don't need the curbside space that exists, or there's other things that we can help to facilitate to make the curbside plan or the loading and unloading work for businesses. You know, we'd certainly want to hear about that and hear how these are working for you. The last thing I'm going to bring up is a sidewalk extension. This is not the best sketch, but we are going to be using, they're called K71, so kind of a flex post, and then we're calling them concrete blocks, but it's basically a beveled edge little curb that we can install in place with some planters. The planters will be at the end of the block. So this will allow for about 6.5 feet of pedestrians to move on the street level, but protected from vehicles. And we hope that will help with social distancing. And we're also looking to the bid and to all of you for ideas on how to best to use this space. So I will pause there and go back to our Zoom meeting. I see that there are some questions. So I don't know if you want me to jump right into those, or Neil, if you would like.
Haley, I think you could jump.
Hearing none, I will. Looks like a lot of questions. I'll try to walk through some of these. I'm sorry. Were you saying something, Neil?
Now I'm saying that you can jump right into the questions if you can see that.
Great. Okay. So I think there was a question about the community input that's going into this plan. So we're really excited to partner with the bid and be able to have forums like this to reach out to you. We also did do quite a bit of input back in 2019, and I think the bid and DDOT did input in 2017 as well, working with the community and trying to get some input. So a lot of that did come into consideration in terms of where we're putting a lot of our sidewalk extensions and loading zones. It's something that we heard a lot of support for. Because of the nature of the emergency and quick build pilot, we are trying to go ahead and get something in the ground pretty quickly, but because it's a pilot, we're taking comments throughout the entire pilot period. It's a 12-month pilot as it stands right now. So we are going to be looking for feedback. We have a robust evaluation program that we will be developing on multiple measures. So not just bus performance and traffic performance elsewhere in surrounding corridors, but also how the curbside spaces are working and how it's working for the businesses. I'm looking at a couple of the others. I will try to get back to you in terms of the additional pedestrian protections, but I think it's certainly a good idea for us to ensure that the pedestrians are safe regardless of where they are. And for the valet permit, there's several valet zones that are actually on side streets. So those are not changing. And I think that one could apply for valet permits on side streets, the same process that they can right now. We have worked with our public space regulatory division, and they are aware of this program. So they have noted that there's a few temporary permits that were on 7th Street that will expire before construction starts. But I think we've talked to, I believe, most of the individuals that have active permits on 7th. I'm happy to talk more if you're an individual that meets that criteria. I'm going to scroll down just to see if there's other questions, and I can come back to Mark's questions as well.
Haley,
Sure.
Can I just ask one of Mark's questions? Because question that we keep hearing all the time. Mark asked, now that cars will be redirected from 7th Street, will there be additional pedestrian protections on 8th Street, particularly at non-signaled intersections like 8 and D, where existing drivers already blow through the stop signs? That's Mark's words, not mine.
I think that's a great point. So one of the things that we've actually looked at have been some changes to the signalization and minor lane configuration on the streets where we expect most of the cars to detour, and that's actually 6th Street and 9th Street. I don't know that we've looked specifically at 8th and D, but this is absolutely something that I will take back to our traffic engineers, because that's a great point. We don't want to be introducing new pedestrian dangers to that. So let me mark these as answered live. So that's a good one for us to take back. And I will try to see if Neil can help me export this chat so that we can either add to our FAQs or be able to share it with this group and with others. I think I tried to answer the valet one. Feel free to let me know if I have additional ones. Changes to lettered street parking. I don't think we are planning on changing the cost or anything on the parking. There's a few meters that are being removed for the additional commercial and PUDO zones, but it is pretty minor. There's not a ton of parking that's being removed from those streets. I don't think we have any changes. If there are users that can get permits right now for valet spaces, that will still be in effect, but we would probably reserve the new PUDO zones and commercial loading zones. Those would not be able to be blocked. We recognize that, especially in the G Street area, that and I think there's a block between E and D that are longer. We will say, especially for individuals with disabilities, paratransit is still permitted as a permitted use on travel lanes. So those vehicles will be permitted to use the bus lanes. Otherwise, people will need to be dropped at the nearest cross street. We have been working in terms, there's a question, what will enforcement look like? And so we are currently following our district protocols. MPD is in charge of moving violations, and the department, 3 different decks that are going in as these cars is having a new bus bike lane put in as well right now. So we've been meeting bi-weekly with our enforcement agencies, talking about how to manage these new lanes and try to help get vehicles adjusted to the new pattern. Our intent is not to try to make things unbearable for motorists or users of the network. So we're also going to have traffic control officers from DDOT out on this and other streets as we start instituting the new traffic patterns. But those will be the agencies that will be permitted to write tickets. And MPD is on the enforcement team working with us to try to make this work. I will say that our partner agencies have been excellent. When we did the H&I bus lane pilots last year, we're all trying to use limited resources and trying to design this to work as best as we can, but they've been great at trying to help us from the enforcement side. Will it be clear to trucks that they can use 7th Street? We do have a number of signs that say bus truck only, and we'll actually be writing in the red paint at the beginning of each block, bus truck only, as well as from the lettered streets. We will have signs that will say no right turn, no left turn, except buses and trucks. So they will, hopefully that will be helpful. Like, we'll certainly look for feedback if the signage isn't working. That's something that's fairly easy to adjust during the pilot. Trucks will be permitted to deliver on lettered streets as well as on 7th Street, as long as they use one of the commercial loading zones and park in any designated or legal space on the lettered streets.
Haley, before you go on
Sure.
to the next question, so how were we able to provide DDOT with feedback on the pilot during the pilot period?
That's a great question. So one of my colleagues is currently coming up with an evaluation program that is both standard to all of the car-free lanes in terms of some of the bus metrics, in terms of how buses are performing, but also that is specific to 7th Street. I think some of the things on 7th Street we're most interested is the curbside. I'll actually bring that back up so that we can see it a little bit better. But on 7th Street, we want to make sure that the curbside space is working for businesses and for other users, and the sidewalk extensions are working and are safe. So one of the things that we plan to do, this isn't fully fleshed out yet, is to have some sort of simple form. It can be both an online and a paper version that businesses who are actually able to be on the street and observing at different times of day can say, I see this type of occupancy, I see this type of violation. We know that our enforcement won't be there every single minute or at every zone every minute of every day, but we'll try to look for a way that you can help us be eyes on the street and collect data on how the curbside is being used and how well some of the measures we put into place are working.
And just as a follow-up to that question, Haley, is there a transparent format that DDOT has in place for evaluating pilots like this so that the public can see how the pilot is going and make recommendations for its continuance or discontinuance?
I think that's a great feedback. In the past, we've had pilots for different levels of time. I think that doing all 3 of these car-free lanes for a full year, and also given everything that's going on with COVID and how much our transportation and business patterns have changed, it's a bit unprecedented. But I really like that idea of making some way to be transparent and to be able to get that out there. So that's a piece of feedback I can certainly bring back is how we can have checkpoints to report on some of the data as we go. And we'll probably be at certain milestones just because it takes us a little bit of time to get the data from WMATA and to process and evaluate and make sure that we can report it in a way that's easy to understand.
And then my final question, and these are just all questions that I hear from our stakeholders. So it's a year-long pilot, and a year is a long time. So can you commit to having sort of frequent sort of community updates where you can share data and experiences from the pilot? And I would like to suggest at least on a quarterly basis. So if there are any corrections that can be made, that they're being made in real time.
I love that idea. I think that's great, and that will help us be transparent and accountable. I think a quarterly basis sounds good. I would certainly want to confer with some of the more data guru colleagues of mine who can tell us how realistically they get some of those reporting measures processed and shared. But I think quarterly sounds reasonable, and if it's something that we could commit to doing more frequently, I'd be happy to do so. Right.
Those are my questions.
Sorry, any other questions, Neil? Yeah.
No, that's it for me for now.
Okay. I think I've answered a couple of this. We answered how long the program will last, and we talked about partnering with businesses. I would certainly be interested from the chat box. We'll try to go there next. If others do have ideas or would like to talk more about ways that their businesses would be willing to partner, I think that having regular updates through the bid or if they're, we've also talked to the ANC and the corridor. We'd be happy to do that. But if you have other ideas, we'd certainly be interested. I think that that's part of the point of the pilot and also our community outreach period right now before we start construction. Going back to Mark's question, I think we answered this in terms of trucks being able to make deliveries. I think you noted that there's often trucks that park in the bus zone. So that's something that, A, we can help point out to our enforcement agencies, but B, our hope is that we're providing truck loading zones in the right areas, but as eyes on the street, we would love help to see like, hey, this zone at Ian 7th is constantly occupied by trucks and we have some actual data on it. That might help us to get additional enforcement and also help communicate with the trucks to comply with this. Let's see if there's a couple other questions. Anticipated benefits. And I think Jerry brings up a good point. So we certainly hope to have decrease in bus times. We actually also hope to have increases in bus reliability. So the buses that are using this right now, or that we anticipate to use it, are the 70s. They go up all the way through wards 4 in Ward 2, and I think go down to at least Ward 6, potentially further south, and also serve a lot of transfers, people that are coming from all parts of the district. And so if some days the bus gets stuck in traffic and is stuck behind a bus stuck behind cars that are turning or trucks, then some days that trip might take 30 minutes and some days it might take 75 minutes or it might take 40 minutes, and it's hard for people to plan. So reliability is huge in terms of helping people to use buses as a lifeline for jobs and essential services. So we really hope to increase reliability by just taking out congestion and one of the key bottleneck points for bus routes. We also know that this is an area that is important for pedestrian safety. There's a lot of pedestrians that walk around this area. So we certainly are looking at safety and crash statistics. There's a couple of intersections on this corridor nearby that are considered to be high crash. A lot of it is from vehicles that are turning. So honestly, by taking some of the private vehicles and having them not make turns at some of these many intersections, we expect safety for both motorists and for pedestrians to improve dramatically. And in terms of the outdoor space for restaurants, I think many of you are aware that we've started a permit program for parklets for restaurants. That's through our public space regulatory division and our neighborhood planning group. So we're really excited about that. I can share the link for that in the chat box in just a minute, or any of my colleagues can if you're more easily access it. But any business that's interested in that will have to still apply for one of those permits. However, the fact that we'll have some of these sidewalk space already delineated will make it a little bit easier for that application to be processed. So we're excited for people to use this outdoor space. We don't have a set way for the sidewalk extensions to be used. We think it'll depend on the businesses that are nearby, the pedestrians, and being able to find a safe way to do that. Food trucks was another question. We actually have, there's a section on this map. It's probably a little hard to see. I'll see if I can zoom in. But just here south of G Street near the Portrait Gallery. So we're working with DCRA to instill a new mobile vending zone. So this is close to where food trucks currently operate. We've heard from some stakeholders in the quarter that they're excited about keeping those food trucks there. And there's a sign right now that says mobile vending zone, but DCRA actually says it's not a mobile vending zone. So this is a fun coordination between agencies. So we're trying to get that reinstalled, but we will not plan to ban food trucks, and food trucks will meet the definition of trucks and will be allowed to use this corridor. So we do have space designated for them. In terms of streeteries operating in the winter, I don't have an answer to that question in terms of our program, but I believe that we would continue to permit restaurants to be allowed to do outdoor dining in winter. I'd have to get more information on that. The volume of passengers that will be using the buses moving through the street, I can look that up. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there are some of our highest ridership buses in the district. I can pull up that graphic. I believe my colleague Megan, who's online, has a graphic with that. I don't know if you want to add it into a chat if you see that. And the last thing I have from an anonymous attendee is noise levels from street performers. We have not explored preventing street performers on 7th during the pilot. And I've heard that concern, but that's not something that DDOT has looked into. We're focusing on trying to make this corridor safer for pedestrians and faster and more reliable for buses.
So Haley,
Yeah,
Haley,
go ahead.
there is one question, I think, similar to the vein of question by the anonymous attendee. I think
Okay.
Howard asked the question about the street performers and noise, particularly affecting the residents of Gallery Place. Howard insinuates that there's that the widening of the sidewalks may result in more space for street musicians, drug dealers, homeless encampments. Are there any plans by DDOT to address, I'm not suggesting that this will happen, if there's a suggestion that it might, are there any plans by DDOT to address those concerns?
We're at this point, we're in the pilot. We are very interested in hearing comments from the public. Our focus is trying to get the sidewalk space extended for safe social distancing and more space for pedestrians to move around. And we are happy to talk to partner agencies. Again, this isn't really within DDOT's jurisdiction, but similar to how we're talking to our partner agencies about enforcement, it's something that we could certainly talk about, but we'd certainly be happy for any of you as businesses and as whether you're residents or businesses or employees in the area to bring this up to those agencies as well.
Well, I do think at least in the initial stage of the pilot, it will be probably good to have MPD provide a little bit more vigilance on the corridor during the first phase of the pilot period so that, at least we could try and tamp down any potential upswing in unsavory activities. And so that would be my recommendation as for the initial phases of the pilot, just to get sort of more visible presence of police officers on the street.
Okay, great, thank you. Trying to see, I think there's a couple additional questions that have come in. Are there additional waste or recycling containers or additional staff to maintain cleanliness? We'd be happy to look into those, or that's something that we could also send back to the bid. I know that you have some great ambassadors that already work in the area.
So yeah, we plan during the pilot period, at least initially during the pilot period, to put some more bodies on that corridor, just to monitor its usage, and then just take care of any sort of excess trash that may occur for more people, more pedestrians being on the street. So yeah, we will be keeping an eye on that. There is a rumor, Haley, that the beginning phases of DC putting a light rail on 7th Street. Can you confirm or deny that?
If there is plans, I don't know about it, so it hasn't reached my level. I do know that 7th Street had at one point been part of a very extensive streetcar network and streetcar plan, but the latest from the mayor, which is a few years old now, is that all of the district's efforts on streetcar are focused on a single east-west corridor, and at this point it's simply maintaining our existing 8th Street Vending line and moving east towards the Vending Road Metro Rail Station. So that is everything that the district is working on regarding streetcar light rail that I'm aware of. I think the other question pertains to generators and speakers being prohibited in the expanded sidewalk area. I think that's probably something that's out of DDOT's jurisdiction, but I'd be happy to pass that question on and record that feedback. There's also a note about electric pedestals, so trucks could plug in instead of running generators, and that could make some good EV charging areas. So again, that's great feedback. I do think because we've got this nice long pilot, and as Neil noted, that there's some opportunities for feedback. If this is something that has a lot of traction and support and something that is feasible and affordable, it's certainly something that DDOT could look into at a midway point in the pilot.
So Haley, I think just before you wrap up, if you can just give sort of a quick summary of timelines and next steps on this project, I think we'd all appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we've completed our design right now, and we are working on doing some materials testing. We're specifically trying to get some red paint that works well and is safe for the buses to operate on. So our construction timeline is driven by that. So we are anticipating starting construction on the sidewalk extensions around August 17th. And we expect to start working on the red paint itself and some of the work in the street a few weeks later, so early to mid-September. So we don't expect the traffic patterns to change until, or change significantly and have some of those restrictions go in place, I believe, until September. We're still finalizing that schedule. And we expect that the entire construction project to be wrapped up around late September, and that's contingent upon being able to get all of our materials delivered on time.
Great. Well, Haley, I want to thank you and Megan and others from DDOT who have joined today. Thanks for sharing the information with us and the folks who participated. There are at least 28 others who are participating. If people have additional questions or need or have requests for additional information, Haley, what's the best contact information for them?
So I believe my email address is on the notice of intent for this, as well as the one pager. So you're welcome to email me directly, and I'll make sure that we channel that to the right place. So I believe, I can just minimize the questions here. So you'll see that my email address, haleypeckett@dc.gov, is located on this one pager. There's also a website. I would encourage, if you just have questions, check out our FAQ online, because that will answer a number of those questions. But I'll definitely stay in touch with Neil and Jaron from the bid, and anyone who has specific questions, I'm happy to answer or have a conversation about that.
There's just one last question that came in. Will sidewalk construction interfere with outdoor dining of restaurants?
That's a good question. The way that the sidewalk construction happens, because we have these really heavy blocks, we're probably going to be doing kind of one small segment at a time. So if there was something that was affected, it would probably only be for a day or two. It wouldn't be for an extended period of time. I don't have the details on that. I can learn more information, but it should not be a significant impact.
Right. And I think if you can continue to post up an FAQ page so that people can get real-time information and have their questions answered, I think this will be helpful.
That's great. Well, I will try to export some of the questions that we came up with today. Some of these are ones that I wasn't able to answer,
Right.
and I'll want to make sure that we can get that. So I will try to work on a response to those and be able to get that back to the bid and circulate to all the participants who either were able to attend today or who were not.
Yeah, and we'll try to, as a bid, to keep an updated FAQ page so that we can pass information back and forth to DDOT. So Haley, thank you so much for your time this morning and for resources. And for folks who have joined us, in case you don't know how to reach us at the bid, you can email me at neil@downtowndc.org, or ebony@downtowndc.org, or jaron@downtowndc.org. And among the three of us, we should be able to answer your concerns. So again, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Haley, we appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.